Welcome everyone to Elevate with V. So excited to be here with everyone today. So this podcast was inspired by my own healing journey and as a way to express gratitude to all those beautiful people that have guided and supported me on my journey. And I would love to share who they are and their amazing gifts with all of you. And I can't wait to introduce my guest today, Pamela. She is a Shamanic Reiki Master and all-round medicine woman, specializing in helping people heal from trauma, complex PTSD, and soul loss. She is also a spiritual teacher, and one of her soul's purposes here is to help people meet and communicate with their spirit guides and past loved ones to follow their soul's purpose. So, Pamela, I love your energy, your authenticity, your genuineness, and guiding others to heal and to follow their soul's purpose. You have such an openness and a generosity of spirit. You share openly about many parts of your healing journey and so many of your healing gifts, which we will get into a little today. So welcome, Pamela.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here and honored. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh my God, absolutely. It's like, you and I sort of like, I found you through Facebook Lives, through common people that we both know. And I just remember from like the first live that I popped into, I was like, oh my God, I definitely need to follow her. Like I could just tell your energy and your spirit. I'm like, yes, I love it. So, I popped into many of your lives. So
oh yes, I know. And every time I connected with your energy, I was like, wow, because when you tap into the energy, you can kind of, especially when you're asking a certain question, and then I'll tap in and I can feel your energy and feel a lot about you. I was like, yes, I can feel this resonance with this beautiful soul. So I kind of had a feeling something was going to happen between us in the future. But and I'm just like, okay, let's park it and see what happens.
You're like, I'll wait for the invitation. Something's going to happen. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think I always know, but I always like to also give some time and space because I was like, it's just nice to connect with all these, people like you. Like I said, they're just some amazing people that I've had an opportunity to connect with. And, I know we all have soul contracts that we were like, okay, this is how we're going to meet. This is how we're going to connect. And so it always gets me really excited.
I know, it's still like, wow, when it happens, isn't it?
Yes. But I think one of the interesting things, and we haven't even gotten into the interview part, but there's something about what I realized is when I'd done enough of my own work where I wasn't like, I had cleared enough of the things that I needed to in order to kind of step into who I am and what I'm trying to create. That's when the universe starts to like bring the people in, because now your frequency is shifting and your energy is shifting. And so those people are getting like, I'll say magnetized into my field.
Yeah, what I tend to call it is like you attract your soul family.
Yes.
Like it's the opening. So when you go through lots of your healing process, you let your barriers down, you work on your shadow, and then you start opening your heart. I call it the opening of the rose. And that's when it's like you send out that signal and then your soul tribe just starts to grow and grow. It's so beautiful.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, because there's one part where you're also releasing and shedding a lot of relationships, but then the universe is also saying, okay, don't worry, there's going to be more people coming in. So just
because it can be quite painful when you're in that moment and even if you know that whatever it is, the person or a situation that you need to let go of, that process can still be painful. So when you're in that, you don't necessarily always see that actually there's going to be new doors opening. And it's not until when that shift starts to happen, when you start to realize, and I can still remember some of those moments.
Yes. And I'll be honest, it was very challenging. And sometimes it comes up, like I literally had this experience about 7 to 10 days ago when I just woke up and there was this profound sense of like grief almost, of like all the shedding, right? Of like, wow, there are all these people that I used to be connected to that were so like, I felt close to me that now it just doesn't feel the same way. and to just have grace and compassion, and to say, maybe this is the phase right now. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to be connected to those people in the future, but just for now, this is what's needed in my journey, and to just kind of allow it. And so I allowed it. Isaac and I probably cried a lot that day, but I'm like, okay, that's just what needs to happen. And just, tuning into that and just allowing. So
when that release and surrender is, it's so beautiful. I mean, now I've got to a point where I can actually realize it's beautiful in the moment. But before, it used to take, I don't know how many times it can take you to go through that. I can't tell you how many times I've gone through that. But now I'm realizing in the moment that it's beautiful. And I think when you can do that, you can manifest and change your own timeline, whatever you want to call it, quicker.
Oh, I love it.
It takes experience to do that. And it's just so profound. Everybody's journey that when you speak to people, and it's kind of that healing journey, even though it's different for everybody, I feel like has a set process. And when I can hear and watch people go through that, it just does something to my heart. It just expands even more, which is why I love doing what I do.
Yes, I love it. And it's a perfect segue, because I was like, we just, chatting away about things, which I love, because this is how this podcast goes. We just get into it, and wherever the conversation takes us. But, definitely one of the first things I did want to ask you is, as the show is basically highlighting healing journeys and how each one of us has navigated through storms to get to our silver linings. And so I was going to ask you, what event or events led you into stepping into your healing journey?
I was preparing for this question because I don't know where to start. It's like, do I start from when I was very young, or do I start when I had the main spiritual awakening, or do I start? So it's just picking something and then just leading off that. So I'm going to start with when I had I always say my main spiritual awakening. So when my marriage fell apart and I lost everything, my house, my job, and I had to basically really have that rebirth and start from scratch. And it was that point when I was in the dark night of the soul. Even though I had 2 children, I couldn't see the wood from the trees. I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew is that I'd been married for 16 years and I was happy. And then all of a sudden, everything fell apart and I wasn't happy. And me being me, I didn't want to hurt anybody else. Well, I too, you tend to internalize it. So I was going through real pain to the point where I didn't want to be here anymore. So I tried to take my own life. And I think that's the point when everything really started to change. And that's when my spirit guides stepped in. And and now looking back, it's so funny because they were actually screaming at me. But at the time, I think they were having to do that because I just wasn't in the right frame of mind. But looking back, this is why I was saying I don't know where to start. So I've always had that voice in my head ever since I was little. I think 8, I can remember the first time. And it literally is a voice in my head because it's my spirit guide. And I just people used to draw to me for advice, even very young, and I would know how to help them somehow. But then I realized it wasn't actually the norm to be doing that. So then I closed off, and I literally closed off until 30 years later was when I had my spiritual awakening. And then the voice was so familiar when it came back to me, and just pulled me out of the dark spot little bit by little bit when I realized I needed help. And that was the main thing, was reaching out. And actually, because I wasn't that person to ask for help. I was a qualified lawyer. I was just this independent, busy mom. The last thing I would ever think about was me. And I had some quite difficult times with my children when they were little, like really poorly. I nearly lost my youngest and went through so much that I was at the bottom always, like never put myself first. And oh gosh, I could go on and on and on. So I think listening to my guides, listening to my higher self changed my life. and it was that point when I think it took about a year after I was going through a year of intense healing. I only had one counselling session because all I needed to hear was one thing, and I realised what the issue was, which was a part of the marriage. I realised I fell out of love with my husband at the time, and it was like a light bulb moment. You know, because I realised there's something not quite right. What on earth? So I had that light bulb moment, and I started to listen to what I needed. My guides told me to open up a spiritual group on Facebook about 6 years ago, to talk about the dark night of the soul, when you lose everything, when you start, you know, and that's how it all began. And it was just something that I did part-time because I was still a lawyer. I was just used to do this part-time. I used to talk to people and say, you know, anybody else feeling this? You know, and just the group just started from there, started to build up. And it was then I realised, do you know what? This feels so good. Helping, talking, sharing. This, I want to do this. So I was made redundant, and I feel like that was a little bit of a tower moment, you know, when you can have a tower moment. That was the universe making changes for me to actually make a decision to do this full time. So I just slowly built up my business. It was part-time to start with, and then it just shifted to full-time. And it's grown ever since then. And I remember during lockdown was when I opened up my other group, when I did festivals every month, all for free, all online, because I really noticed, because of lockdown and what was happening, that people just needed help. And I got all different type of hosts coming from all over the world to do things for free for people. And it was just so heartwarming, you know, just to experience all that. And then I had the one in person over here, which was just amazing. And then I think just helping people go through their own healing journey. And I slowly got more guides stepping in. So I learned Reiki 1, 2, and 3, master level, and then started teaching. And oh boy, did that change my life. You can tell me to stop talking. I feel like I'm going on and on and on and on.
No, it's beautiful. You know, it's always so amazing to hear, you know, people's journeys. And I just always want to allow you to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. But I did want to just jump back for just a moment when you talked about that very, very challenging period where you went through. And I know you said you only had one counseling session. So was your healing journey just the connection, the reconnection with the voices, the guides, and then they guided you through? Or did you actually have some other way that you were healing yourself?
It was my guides, the Reiki, self-healing with Reiki. And then my Native American guide stepped in and taught me Shamanic Reiki, which just blew my mind and everybody else's mind, especially during the festivals. The one thing that I did want to mention was when I started to write my book. So I've got 2 that are in the pipeline, but one's the autobiography, which that really kickstarted my healing journey. That's when I realised the deep trauma that was there way before the marriage. Like the marriage was just the catalyst. Because when you're writing it in black and white, it's just so profound when you can actually realize, no, my trauma actually began when I was 13. So I just think writing things down in journals is so profound, and I think it can excel your healing journey as long as you're ready for it, because that's the one thing, like, you've got to really be ready for a healing journey. Otherwise you'll just stop, and then you'll either put your feelings back down here, because that's what I was doing for 30 years, was putting the feelings and some of the things what happened that, you know, weren't very nice to talk about, you put it down here and, you know, hope that it goes away. But it didn't. It just kept coming back up, and I kept putting it back down. You know, when you look back and you can actually say, gosh, there was a moment when I could have probably healed earlier, but I was pushing it back down because I didn't really understand it. And that's one thing that I'm grateful for, that we're here together now in this earth plane, because healing is only just at the tip of the iceberg for people. People are only just starting to talk about it more openly. But now you can openly say in a household, oh, you know, talk about healing. It's like, I really wish I could have done that so many years ago. But I still think that healing and past trauma needs to be spoken about more in relationship settings.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
One thing that I think is really needed.
I agree. And in fact, you know, it was perfect that you shared about this, because I was going to ask you, like, something that you are very focused on is helping people to heal from trauma and complex PTSD and soul loss. And so, you know, I wanted to ask you about that, because clearly that's coming from your own personal experience. And again, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, because I think it's really important to make sure that people are not reliving trauma. But I think when people like you and me, who, and I would say you more than me, who have done enough of their healing work, you know, it's not going to have the same impact as, say, even 2 years ago when you were still working through it, you know. Not to say that it doesn't still have a little bit of trigger, because it'll always be there, but that's when we know how far along we've come, when we talk about something and you don't feel as attached to the trauma around it. So I would love to hear from you, because I know that's such an important piece of what you do and so powerful. And I know that it's something that so many people could, like, just learn more about.
Relate to as well. I think I'd just like to share a little bit of the specifics of my own trauma, because I think that might help. And then talk about maybe complex PTSD and all of the other stuff that I feel are all connected. So my journey of trauma really began with loss. So I lost my own child when I was 15. So I was very young, got pregnant very young, experienced some trauma at school while that was happening. So I was bullied. I experienced some abuse from my then partner, which I think kick-started me losing the baby. Then I lost my nan at the same time, which was huge for me, because she was a big, she's the one who got me into my faith, because I am a Christian. I am a believer in God, the divine, and she was just huge for me. So when I lost the baby when I was so young, it was so traumatic that I kept it inside, and I didn't tell anybody because I didn't understand. And I think back then there was no real support for teenagers going through any type of trauma, especially domestic violence. You know, for someone so young, losing a baby. I mean, being pregnant back then was a big deal. for being at school. So that's, I think, where mine began. And then also my brother at the same time was going through non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So he had cancer of the blood and he almost died 3 times. And I was watching that happen at the same time. So I think that started the process. And then I went from going into a bad crowd, hanging around with the wrong people, because I think I was searching for love externally, even though the one thing that I struggle with still is the memory. So I can struggle with, as I'm talking to you now, I'm trying to think of the timeline, because one things that happen when you go through trauma and you suffer from complex PTSD is your memory. So I still sometimes struggle to place the memory. So I might go back and forth a little bit. So when I was 17, I then ended up in another bad relationship. And I was drug raped by 2 people who were, I suppose at the time, I thought I could trust. And they knew my family. They knew, it was just, I think that memory didn't come back to me until 6 years ago, at the same time as the spiritual awakening, when it all just came back. And I realised, oh my God, this is why I struggle with trust in relationship settings, and this is why I struggle with X, Y, and Z. And I was actually quite closed off. And I went from that, not telling a soul, didn't tell anybody that it happened. And I went from that to another abusive relationship. And that is the general pattern, I think, what happens when we don't heal it and we don't resolve it. And when I look back now, because I've wrote it all down in my book, I can see I've been through every type of, so mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. I've had every single one in a different relationship. Like I've gone from one to the other to the other. And then I ended up in a narcissistic abusive relationship after that, which is the one that I think was the catalyst. And that type of, I don't use the word narcissist very often because a lot of people can, I think, use it out of context. For me, the true meaning of somebody, doesn't matter whether it's a man or a woman, has narcissistic tendencies, is that they just use manipulation as love. That their idea of love is manipulating to get what they want. That's what that's my opinion of somebody who's narcissistic. And that's because they've probably been taught the same way. And that doesn't excuse it. There's no excuse for it. But you can see the pattern now. And now I look back, I can see what was happening to me, but I just didn't know it at the time. Because I'd gone through so much trauma, I was already closed off. I was already numb because I didn't deal with all the other wounds that were inside. I was jumping from one thing to the next without processing or healing. Is it any wonder I was at the point where my body and my mind just was like, this cannot continue. So I can see it all clearly now. And also I think I had to accept some responsibility, especially for the breakdown of the marriage, even though there was, elements of the narcissistic abuse in there. I accept my own responsibility, which is another huge healing element, because I actually allowed it to happen. And that was a big turning point for me. The self-love and the self-worth that comes from learning that is huge. So when I work with people, straight away I can recognize exactly what they're talking about from my own experience, but also I can use obviously my psychic and my intuitive abilities too, and being able to tap into how they're feeling. I've always had that ability to tap into how somebody feels. It's almost like jumping into their body and feeling what they're feeling. So I think having that, but having the experience, and then having my guides, especially with the soul loss element, because you don't realize that when you're going through trauma, yes, it affects your body, it affects your brain, it affects your energetic body, but it affects your soul as well. And I don't think it's spoken about enough, especially the soul element. You know, when we can see ourselves as a soul, it helps so much. It can be difficult when our human or our ego side tries to step in, which is not a bad thing, you know, you have to work together. But when you can see it from the soul perspective, it helps us to learn. And parts of your soul can become lost because of what happens to you as trauma. So, for example, it does depend on the trauma, but for example, if you go through rape, or if you go through abuse as a child, sexual abuse especially, it almost feels a part of you is taken away. A part of your soul is taken away. And I don't actually think, this is just my opinion, I know there might be other opinions out there, I don't think that every part of your soul is meant to return. This is why you have to be really careful when you deal with soul loss and speak with somebody who actually really understands what happens to the soul, because we all have those contracts, those, you know, journeys that we have to go on, and sometimes you don't need it to come back. And I think it takes a particular practitioner, medicine woman, whatever you want to call it, to be able to really work with your soul, you know, and your guides to understand if that's needed or not. It's fascinating. I'm going to stop talking for a minute.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Pamela, that was a lot. I just can't even imagine, like, and it wasn't just like one or two things. I mean, that's a pretty intense set of things that have happened in, I would say, a fairly compressed time frame. So that is a lot. And, you know, thank you for being open enough to share, because I know that there's going to be, I know everyone that's listening has experienced some part of this story that you're sharing. There's no way that they haven't. And, you know, going from a place where you were like not even sure if you wanted to be on this physical plane anymore, and, you know, to be where you're sitting today, like all the things that you've navigated. And of course, we can have the higher perspective from where you and I are sitting and saying, oh yeah, I needed to experience all of that, so I could now help all the people because I've been in those shoes. I've experienced it. So it comes from personal experience. But when you're going through the journey, it's a completely different thing. And I think it was really valuable for you to share a couple of things, which I think all of us experience when we go through a lot of trauma, depending on how intense it is for us. The tendency is to block it out. Like you literally will not remember until something happens that triggers that memory to come up. It's almost like it goes into some compartment and just hides out. But the thing is, it's always there. It's always part of you. So it's almost like those experiences keep creating the next experience, right? Because we're just kind of recreating the same pattern. So, you know, one would think when they're listening to your story, they were like, wait, how did you go from that to another one, to another one, to another one? It's like,
because you don't want to deal with it.
Well, here's the thing.
And nobody teaches you how to deal with it. And especially society back then was, oh, you can't, you know, say that you're upset about something, you know, just get on with it, just do it. And I think I was like that anyway. And because I'm an empath, I would never want to hurt anybody else. I used to hurt myself. One of the things I did during the time, going through the things at school and with my brother, I used to self-harm. So I used to actually get glass and write on my arm, and so it would cut it. And do you know what I used to write? I used to write "love hurts." So it was actually like a tattoo. But then I used to hide it so nobody could see it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I would never used to tell anybody about that. I think I only told my mum about that like a few years ago when I was going through my healing journey. Because I didn't want to hurt her either, because she didn't, you know, I'm a mum now. If my daughter was doing that and I didn't know, I'd be mortified. So many different elements in that.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, I got so many chills, and I just got chills again when you just shared that piece. It's just, wow, that's a lot. So number one, I'm so grateful that you're writing a book, because I think, you know, it's so important for people to hear your story and the things that you've gone through, because as people read it, it will for sure, of course, bring up things, but there's so much opportunity for healing too, you know, when you read someone else's story. But, you know, I think for me, something that you were sharing earlier, you know, for me reminds me how we just live in patterns until we recognize them to be able to stop and break them. And so it's like, you know, when you were sharing, like, this scenario keeps repeating, it's like, that's just how human beings work. Like, we just keep doing the pattern until something quite dramatic happens. And then
that's when, sorry, I'm just going to say something before I forget. And that's when I get people who join my lives, or I'm talking with a client, like, I literally can see it. They've only got to start talking about something, and I think I know it's the psychic part of me as well that kicks in, but I can feel straight away where the trauma is coming from.
that's amazing. And it's so interesting, as you were sharing, Pamela, I had to mute myself. Like, my throat chakra, I'm like clearing my throat chakra like crazy. I'm like, okay, wow, I guess I'm feeling and experiencing things as she's sharing.
That's
And
awesome.
it's such a profound experience for me to like experience that. Right? I was like, wow, oh my gosh. It's like,
Thank you, Spirit.
And that's so intriguing to me, right? Because as I'm tapping into my own journey and realizing how, you know, I am very sensitive to energies, and never understanding that before, I never had any idea. And I too repeated the same patterns over and over again, not knowing, right?
Yes.
Until the universe is like, well, I've been trying to give you a lot of hints and you're not listening. So now, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to give you the big one. Right. And that's kind of what, you know, started for me. So kind of, I very much resonated with what you were saying, because it's sort of like, even your physical, your mental, your emotional body can only handle so much. I mean, oh my goodness, like, what the stuff that it goes through. And if there's no outlet, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, there's going to be.
That's why we talk about, it's just so profound for me when the universe does step in, because your body also tells you, you know, like, I was already going through stuff and I didn't know why I was feeling certain things. I wanted to run constantly, run away constantly. And instead of, I mean, now I know what to do, obviously, but they don't teach you this. I think they should teach from school. They should teach on how to heal, how to handle emotions, and how to have healthy relationships should be taught in schools.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't agree with you more. And I know you and I were talking about this, how it's like, oh my God, if I knew this at that time. But I also understand we were not meant to. We had to do it this way so that we could do what we're doing, so we could sit in the space that you and I are sitting in to be able to share these stories. And yet, you know, also we were talking about this, the beauty of, you know, all these kids that are coming in, like, they are already coming in with a very, very different set of ideas and thoughts and values. And because the parents are, I hope a lot of us are in that space where we are in our healing journeys, or we've done enough of our healing work, the way that we're connecting with our kids or our children completely different, right?
Yes.
And so
The only issue with that is the schools aren't.
yes.
So
Yes.
that there's just a little bit of work that I think would be helpful but then it's a bigger issue. It's all about red tape. It's about, because the
Yes.
councils behind the schools, I don't know what it's like in America, but in the UK, like the councils are behind the school, and then it's the government that would have to change. So there's lots of red tape around it, which is why I see a lot of work locally where I am from charities that help because of that. And it's such a shame, it's such a shame, because I know that the one thing that I will say and that I am seeing is, yes, a lot of the younger generation are spiritually more advanced than what we were, but the energy is also different to when we were growing up. So the energy of the whole earth plane is different. It's always ascending, obviously, but before, when I was taught Reiki, even before that, we were told it's not good to tap into someone else's energy. You shouldn't be doing that. You have to get consent to do that. And yes, there's so many ethical responsibilities around that, and it's all boils down to the intention. What's your intention of tapping into someone's energy? Like, why would you want to do that? But for me and for the younger generation, it just happens naturally. Like, I can't stop it. I can walk past somebody and I will just know exactly how they're feeling, what's wrong with them, what they've been doing the day before. Like, I don't ask for that information. And this is what's happening with the younger generation. They are seeing, feeling, hearing a lot more than what we did. And I'm just seeing that it's going to go from one extreme to the other. And it might just be because I'm from the older generation, so I want things to be, I want the intention to be right, I want everything to be pure, and it's not always going to be that way. But I can just see it tipping slightly the other way because they are so more advanced. I still think they need a bit of guidance, even though they don't think they do. But it's so fascinating for me.
Absolutely. It really is. And, I just keep hearing so many stories, and, obviously you share about your daughters, and I've had other people share, that their kids who are so young, like the gifts that they have, that if the parents are like, in that space where they too are healers and they're able to guide and, nurture their children. It's like, like I said, a 12 or 13-year-old being certified like in Reiki, I'm like, wow, that is so profound. Like, I would have never heard of such a thing. Exactly. Even a few years ago. I was like, what?
Exactly. There's going to be a lot more that we won't understand. They're going to bring through a lot of more, because it's meant to be that way. I see it as evolution. It's meant to happen this way. I'm just excited. I've got an excited feeling as I'm talking to you.
Well, and yes, and especially being a parent, and especially having the kids and, all that you come with, that you're able to share, and they're watching you, right? So they see you and what you're doing. So I think that's very inspiring. And like they say, it's like, even though you're the parent, there's much for you to learn from them as well, because they're coming in with completely different types of information and energy and frequency. So I think it's that two-way street, right? Like, of course, you're a parent, but they're also bringing so much wisdom, from where they're at. So it's really such a beautiful thing.
You also do have to be careful that, I just want to say this because it popped into my head. Yes. That they are still children on the earth plane. Even though they might be spiritually advanced, their human selves are still young. And I only say this because I've always said to my daughters, if you ever ask me anything, you're going to get the truth. And I don't care what it is. whatever it is you ask me, you're going to get the truth. So she asked me about the not very nice energies that are out there. And I said to her, look, you know, your mom deals with all type of energies. I will only let you know what I think you need to know right now, because I don't want to scare her. She's 13. She's already so sensitive. Like, she'll be having dreams. Like, even when she was very little, she struggled to sleep. And it wasn't until I was having my spiritual awakening I realized why she was having those issues, because she was so gifted. So I only told her so much because I just didn't think it felt right to go into that in depth. And I said, but when you're ready, I will have that conversation with you. So we've just got a bit, I think, because I don't want to take the childhood away from her, you know. It's finding that balance, because I think I didn't have much of a childhood because I just experienced so much. I saw so many strange things that wasn't the norm. And I was very isolated because of that. And I think I've just got to be really careful with her. So hopefully I'm doing the right thing.
Oh, I'm sure you are, Pamela. And I think the thing is that, you know, we've learned this on our journey, right? That there is really no like good or bad or wrong or right. You know, it's just experiences, and we get to choose, right? And every moment we get to make a choice, and, you know, to just remind ourselves and to be compassionate with ourselves that we too are doing our best, you know? So I've learned that through this journey to have grace for myself, obviously, and for others. And it's so important, right? You and I know it's like so important, and we can be the hardest on ourselves. So I think that's something, and especially when you were sharing, you know, back to when you're like, you know, you were like fiercely independent lawyer. I got it. I can do it all myself. And yes, that's all wonderful. And, you know, I realized for myself, I was quite similar, but I also realized that that was like a protection mechanism, because really I'm so sensitive that it was almost like unsafe to show that sensitivity. And so my only way to do that was to create this armor around me of like, I'm really strong and I'm whatever, but really inside I'm like super sensitive. Like, I'm very, very sensitive. So, you know, I could relate to that piece, and it's only through this journey that
you soften.
Yes, that you can actually just like almost start to break down that armor and just be
it's
like,
the opening of the rose.
Yes, exactly. I'm getting chills as you're saying that, because it's like, that's exactly it. And now I just feel like, you know, we're getting to that balance of that divine masculine and feminine within ourselves, right? And to be in a place where I can feel that like softness, and like, it's sort of like, I feel like I'm in a place where I'm getting much more balanced now.
And okay.
Yes, it's okay. And
because I was in a very male dominated environment.
Yes.
I know that played a part, because it's very difficult when you're in a 9-to-5 job like that, and then you go home and trying to switch off and come out of that. I tried to do that, but I think it just naturally, and I think because being an empath and you put yourself at the bottom of the list, like it's almost like you wear a mask constantly, because you want to help everybody else. You want to be a good mom, you know, a good whatever it is you do for a living. And it's okay to not be okay.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And I think the other thing too, Pam, that you were saying that really resonated for me is because I wasn't aware that as an empath, what I created around me was I created people who wanted to just take my energy, and I allowed it, right? And so in that process, I was always left depleted. But the other side of that is also, when you get into that mode, it also gives you an excuse not to look at your own stuff, because you're so busy helping other people that
even when it makes you sick.
Yes.
And you still don't snap out of it.
Exactly. And you're like, wait a second, like I would actually, and I didn't even know Pam, and I was like, oh my God, I'm just feeling so drained and exhausted. I just don't even understand. But I had no idea. I had no tools. I had no clue. So somehow, whether I was listening or not, my guides were like helping me along the way, because I sure as heck was not very good at listening to them. You know, I would go straight to my head. Like I was probably getting a lot of messages, but I was like, no, I'm just going to go to the head. Oh no, like red flags, just
I
missing them all.
wish I'd have kept a daily journal of what my guide showed me. I mean, it would be humongous. And now more so, because I do, you know, I have a group, and so things are recorded more when things happen now. But like back then, I really wish I'd have kept this open journal of how my guides showed me everything, because they brought the people to me. You know, they brought an opportunity my way. They told me to look here. They told me, you know, and I just wish I'd have kept more of a journal about that. It'd be fascinating to read now.
I know, I totally agree. And I think I was really good when I started my journey during the pandemic, because I was already kind of journaling for something else. So I would, and then I kind of just stopped. I think I got lazy or whatever happened. And then I was doing a little bit of like audio journaling. I did that for a little bit and then I stopped. So it's sort of like, I'm not very consistent, but I've just gotten back into the practice about a month ago. And I'm really enjoying just getting back into that. And I know for someone like me, it's actually really important, because part of it is, you know, I know I'm someone who just loves information, and I'm super curious, and I want to just learn about everything. But I also realize that with that, I also have to allow some time for that information to like land in my body, receive it,
Because you can get
integrate it.
overload if you don't.
Yes. And I think I'm guilty of that. And so it's so interesting, because I felt like my guides in the universe is like, okay, since you're not doing that, we're just going to put you to rest, meaning like you're going to just be sleeping a lot. And I was like, why am I sleeping so much? And I was like, oh, okay. Okay, I get it.
You need to process it all before you can actually do anything with it.
Exactly. I was like, okay.
I tell my clients all the time that journaling is so important, and I still do it now. I do it in different ways now. It's more to help others now, but still, I should still be doing it more for myself.
I love that. So, you know, I have to go back, because one of the things we didn't talk about, and obviously this episode could be like 3 parts, because there's so much in it, right? I was like, oh my goodness. But I was going to ask you, because, you know, you talked about being, you know, very psychic and all of these things. Was this also part of something you recognized, but then you just kind of stopped it because you're like, I don't know what this is? Okay.
Yeah, when I was so young, and I realized I was different, and I realized it wasn't the norm to talk to people that aren't there, tell people when I knew things about them. So that's learning the discernment. You know, you don't get taught that either. So I think I just shut everything off, because it was overwhelming, scary, and I didn't understand it. So I think it all happened at the same time with the spiritual awakening, when I really learned. I think because of the type of person I was, like I was very ethical because I was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I knew about ethics, and I knew how important it was. So I kind of had the discernment anyway. I think that's just a part of who I was. But it's completely different when you're tapping into people's lives, when it comes to discernment, because when you're psychic, you can see, feel, hear with all your clairs. I mean, everyone's at a different level, and everybody works different level with their clairs, which is one thing that I teach people. But when you get so much information, it's like, what do you do with it? It all depends on whether you've got a client. What are they asking you? What's the intention? What is the information that you're getting? Are you better delivering it in a more diplomatic, gentle, soft way? You know, it's so many things that you could talk about when it comes to teaching about psychic and skills and clairs, and discernment's just one of the topics. which I find fascinating.
Wow, I love that, because it's just, I could tell that it was definitely a gift that you had from very early on, but it wasn't safe. And it was also like, what is happening to not have the
Yeah.
understanding, the inner standing. And so it's like until everything sort of, started to kind of
Yeah,
happen.
like I used
And
to have people at the end of my bed. I used to hear noises that weren't there, and I used to see strange things. Like, I mean, nowadays the starseeds are very openly spoken about, but back then it was aliens, and it wasn't ever spoken about unless it was on the news. So yeah,
wow. And you had to keep it all to yourself,
yeah.
which is the other part that's like super challenging, right? Like all of these experiences and traumas and all of the stuff that you went through, like by yourself,
I was just in my body, in my
Yeah.
mind, in my just
Mhm.
being carried around.
Yeah. That's wow. It's incredible, like what you've navigated through, Pamela. That is really
Bless
some
you.
woo. But now it's like because you did all of that work, now so many other people can receive healing and information and guidance, right? Because I think at the end of the day, what you and I are doing is we didn't get the support that we needed. And so now that we've learned through our own journeys and our healing, it's like we can't wait to share and,
Yes.
support others and be like, I don't want you to go through this. There are other ways. Like, let's get to this as soon as you recognize that you're ready.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's one thing I love about doing spiritual guidance sessions, because every time it blows me away. And what one thing that I do, I mean, there's so many things that I do that I love. It's so difficult to choose. But when I can connect people with their guides, and when I help them themselves communicate with them. So it's okay, somebody else telling you, oh, your guide's this and that, this and that. But actually, when you can see, feel, and communicate with them yourself, and you can protect your energy, your guide can help you heal. Guides can help you do so much, but teaching someone to do that for themselves, I can't even tell you some of the experiences. That's why I'm doing that book. So I've got the other book about the process with guides, with what your guides can teach you. I can't wait to get that one out, because even just the stories alone,
that
it's
sounds
mind
amazing.
blowing.
I love that. No, and I think it's so amazing, right? Because I think it's also reminding people that
You're not alone.
you're not alone, and that we're each actually quite powerful, and
Oh,
if only we knew. And so that's kind of what you're doing. You're kind of helping people see their own magnificence, helping
oh,
them see their own magic, and saying you are fully capable. You don't need to keep coming to me. I will show you how you can do this for yourself. And I know, for me, that was definitely something. It's been a journey. I'm still in it, where I don't trust a lot of the information, and I do get a lot of information, but I'm like, oh, that's just my imagination. No, I'm just making that up, and slowly I'm recognizing, and even my team is like, okay, we'll have to show her 3 times because she refuses to believe it on the first turn.
You're
So
not the only one. So in my spiritual development circle that we have every week, trust is the biggest topic.
it truly is.
Trusting your guides, trusting yourself, it's huge. And in the circle, it's quite funny because the guides always do a trust exercise. Like, we work in a place where we work with our higher selves. So we go into the deep trance meditation with our guides and our higher self. And in that space, they'll give you a trust exercise. And it's mind blowing.
I love it.
One lady who she found me on Instagram a while ago, and she had a breakthrough last week with that. And now her business has properly kickstarted. And it's just amazing how, when you can be aligned with your higher self and learn to use it as a tool, it changes everything.
I believe it, Pamela. I believe it. And I'm definitely in that process where I'm really starting to trust and do the work, right? I mean, it
And
takes
I
work.
can
It's
see
not,
that and feel that with you. It's
yeah.
so beautiful.
Well, you know how it's like you do have to put in the work. It's not just
Oh,
like, boom, just happening,
yeah.
but that's the journey, right? It's about learning to just kind of trust yourself and what you're seeing, and coming to someone like you or anybody that you resonate with, who you trust
Yeah.
and you feel like can help to guide you, because sometimes it's okay to get that external assistance to just
Oh my
get you on
God.
that
Yeah.
path, right? And so that's why I'm grateful, like, people like you and other people that I met, even though I haven't like formally done a class or a course, just coming into the lives or like seeing your posts, like for me, it's all like this beautiful, like nurturing information. And I know that it's all part of what's allowed me to be where I am, sitting where I
Yeah.
am in my healing journey. So it's
And
just
look at how
beautiful.
many people you're helping in your way.
Yes, yes. And we all
So
have our way, right? So I think that's the beautiful thing, is that
that's the sole purpose.
soul purpose. I love it. And I know, and I've said this before, where I know that I've probably had many lifetimes where I was not allowed to speak or to
Yeah, because
express
you can feel
myself.
it.
Yes. And so in this lifetime, I'm getting that opportunity, and I'm like, oh, I'm taking it.
You're switching it up. You're switching it up, and you're going to overspeak now. So everybody in the world is going to hear you to over and over and over again. I love it so much.
So it's just so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And I mean, Pamela, I could just keep digging deeper into
Oh
so
no.
many things that you talked about. I mean, your story is so powerful. And I just think that the thing that I love the most is truly like you are that person that represents that pain to purpose story.
Yeah.
And how the impact, like I know, but it's like the work that you do, and your generosity, like even when you do the lives, like it's just so beautiful and it's so genuine. And I know people just feel how much you want to support them and nurture them and just have them see their own beauty and magic. And at the end of the
Yeah.
day, that's what it is, right? It's about kind of like that thing that people always say. It's like, well, you can't keep giving people the fish. Like you got to teach them how to fish, so
And I
that
had
they
one
can.
lady say to me, was it last week? She said, don't you get worried that you're actually teaching people how to do it themselves and that you're not going to get any work anymore? And I said, no. One, because that had never even occurred to me, but one, because I'm very universal led. So I know that I'm being led by a higher purpose. I don't even have that worry there. I mean, and going from, I was a lawyer, I was in a 9-to-5 job, and going from that and then I lost everything. Going from that to having my own business doing this, my own house, my own car. I had nothing in my own name before. I don't need any more validation. Like, I just trust. And it's a very strange place to be. When I talk to people, they say, how can you just live universally led? I'm like, do you know what? I don't even know. It's just there.
I love how you said that though, Pamela, university led. Like, I think for me, this is what I believe, because I know I was completely guided to do the podcast. And
Yes, I can feel that.
yeah. And so I was just like, listen, I have no idea how this is going to work. If this is what I'm doing, I'm going to have to just trust you that you are going to, like, everything that you've guided me through. This is too part of the journey. So I had to release a lot of things, Pamela, like, the finances, the this. I'm like, listen, if I am doing the work that you put me here to do, you are going to take care of me. That is what's happening. So
yes. And that's how I live month to month to month.
yeah.
Like, I don't have a 9-to-5 job, so I know exactly what's coming in. Like, I'm seriously living by the universe. And a lot of people laugh at me, but I love it so much.
Yeah, that's why I said I've moved into that space. I'm not saying that little doubts kick in, but for the most part, I'm like, you know what, universe? I'm being divinely guided and led, and I'm going with it. I'm going to flow with it and trusting, because I know it feels aligned with my soul. And to me, that's what I believe. If you're truly doing your soul's work, things will just fall into place. So
you just feel it here. And it's almost like you don't even have a choice. Like you just get pushed. Like, this is what you're doing.
I know, it was just because I honestly, like, I was trying to remember when someone asked me this, like, where did the idea come from? Like, oh, that's a really good question.
It just dropped in your head like a thought from, I wonder who.
That's really interesting. Okay. But if you think about it, it makes complete sense, right? Because it's like when I've done enough of my own work and I'm looking back and saying, wow, wouldn't it be amazing? Because I had to do so much of this myself, that all these beautiful tools, resources, wisdom, not just from me, but from all these beautiful people that I've met. Like, if we're just sharing our stories, that's it. Like, that's where so much of the healing is. Now it's a bonus that people can extend and say, oh my God, I love Pamela's energy. I love her story. I so resonate. I would love to work with her. I mean, that's like the bonus.
And for me, what really stands out from that is what you are giving out to people is that it's almost like it radiates from you, is that abundance, and that's why it comes back.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I felt like the starburst behind me. I was like, yes.
Need some sound effects going like fireworks. Because that's what it's like in my head.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Oh, well, this has been such an amazing conversation, Pamela. So I'm coming to that part, even though I know you and I could chat on and on and on. I wanted to ask you if you wanted to pull a card, bring in a message for whoever's tuning in to listen. That would be wonderful.
Okay, so I did pull a card. So I've got an energy healing oracle that I use for my energy check-ins that I do in my group. And it's very divinely led as well, this deck is, even though it's an energy healing oracle. And I just felt like it was the right, well, they spoke to me and said to use this deck today. So I chose a card. And funny enough, I did wonder if it's going to match what we're talking about. It's inner work. The card is what came out. So I'll just read it. It says, God brings me ideal situations for my inner healing. As I become aware of my weaknesses, I turn them into strengths. I direct my thoughts toward the light and see the positive side of every stage of my life. Darkness turns into courage, thus I get stronger. So the message is about the inner work, which is turning your pain into your purpose. And I was just like, what a perfect card.
Oh my God, Pamela, do you mind holding that on screen for those people that will actually get a chance to watch the video?
I don't know whether you can see it, but it's a very powerful card.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, they are. I love this deck so much.
It couldn't have been a more perfect message. I mean, this whole podcast is about pain to purpose, and that you would pull that card after all the conversation we're having. So I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness. Pamela, this was just so amazing. And even though we're talking about heavy topics, we were still able to bring in enough levity and joy and, you know, to just share such beautiful information for people. I truly hope that people receive all the beautiful messages and healing, and that they can see that they are so worthy, so deserving, so loved, so supported, and that there's so many beautiful tools if you choose to tap into them. Pamela is a resource. All of her information will be in the bio section everywhere that this gets posted, so you can connect with her if you feel that she's a good fit for you. But it's truly been such an honor and just so much joy. I'm just feeling like my heart is just so happy.
Thank you so much. And I've got to commend you for what you're doing, because you are following your purpose, and I can feel it, and you're stuck to like this bright energy bubble. And also I'm looking forward to your other podcasts, And I just have this funny feeling that there's going to be something else that maybe you might join me on, but we shall see.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's exciting. I'm loving that. So thank you so much, Pamela.
Thank
That's
you.
amazing. And thank you everyone who's tuning in when this episode drops and the future. I just thank you all so much for taking the time for tuning in. And I can't wait to catch you all on the next episode.
Thank you.